So when we put together this session, we really wanted to get sort of diversity perspectives on ecosystem approaches, and especially wanted to hear from people really actively engaged in the fishing industry. And we weren't quite sure, I wasn't quite sure who the best person was, so I sent a bunch of emails out, went to lunch, came back, sort of flood of emails that all said, Stephanie Madsen's who you need to have. And in retrospect, it was an obvious choice. She's very, very involved in council. She's the executive director of the At-Sea Processor Association. So we're delighted that she's here to share her perspectives and the perspective of the broader industry on the application of ecosystem principles. Thanks, Stephanie.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Well, at first, my name is Stephanie Madsen. I'm currently Executive Director of the At-Sea Processors Association. I've lived in Alaska for over 40 years, primarily in coastal communities in Alaska that are very dependent on fisheries. So I've come this way from kind of the bottom up. My training is an elementary school teacher, so this is kind of difficult for me to follow. I think I'm going to make friends with all of you because I don't think I'll use my whole time, and I think I'm the speaker before the break. But I did serve on the North Pacific Fisheries Advisory Panel for 9 years. I served as on the council for 6, and I had the pleasure of serving my fellow council members as a chair for 4 years. And so I did get to travel around the country to see other councils at the CCC meeting. But today I'm here to speak a little bit about the stakeholder perspective about EBFM. I get confused sometimes. It's EBM, it's EBFM. I'm beginning to understand the difference. I have to tell you, though, that I think generally, first the disclaimer. I am up here speaking on behalf of the stakeholders, but as you can imagine, we have a diverse industry in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. So I apologize to all my colleagues if I have misrepresented your views. It's tough, but I think generally, I think most of us feel like we've been doing ecosystem-based fisheries management for a long time. I won't go through all the things that we've been doing since the Magnuson even came in. You heard Dr. Fluharty talk about the 2 million metric ton cap. We've had observers pretty much from the beginning. We've had spatial and temporal areas of removals and areas available for fishing. We've done a lot. So I think that we believe we've been doing ecosystem fisheries management. I also think that our ecosystems considerations chapter that we've been doing since 1994 really helped change that perspective. I think all of the stakeholders have changed their perspective since we've started doing that, and that has been beneficial. I also think the difficulty here is that I can't get my head around about what it is that we're doing when we talk about ecosystem-based fisheries management. And I think that if I asked 5 people, you'd have different views of what that is, and you'd have different definitions of what that is. And I think that's why the stakeholders really are concerned about any language in a statute that's going to require it. Because I think the courts will end up deciding what that means, and I don't think that's healthy for any of us. I do believe that because we've been doing ecosystem fisheries management in Alaska for a long time, we don't really understand, and I think I agree with Dr. Fluharty that it's incremental and not revolutionary. I think that's the only way it's going to be successful. I've already told you I'm an elementary school teacher by trade. Some of this science is very difficult to understand. I am glad to hear Dr. Hollywood talk about including the stakeholders, and communication is going to be key. I think in order for us to feel comfortable with the science and the science that supports these decisions, we're going to have to understand it. The plan team process that the North Pacific Council has established is an example of where if you have an open and transparent discussion, you allow the stakeholders to come in and ask questions and they understand how these things are done. I think that's the model that we should be continuing to use. I also would like to point out that our plan teams are an ecosystem-based approach plan team. We have fisheries people, we have seabird people, we have marine mammal people. So I would make the argument that even in our stock assessment documents, there is an eye towards the ecosystem and the impact of fishery removals on the rest of the ecosystem. Even our SSC is made up of diverse academic perspectives, and those discussions are valuable. And I think that it is a way of thinking. To me, ecosystem-based fisheries management is really a way of thinking. It's not really a thing, it's how you view it, it's how you think about it. Are we really considering the impact of fisheries removals on other things? Do we understand the connectivity of it? I think from a stakeholder perspective, it's scary because you know what? The only thing that you manage is me. So no matter what you do on this science level, usually the only thing that you're going to do is either minimize the target species I can catch, put more constraints on me on my bycatch, and where I can and can't fish. So I think that's a little bit of the reluctance of stakeholders about moving too rapidly towards this ecosystem approach to fisheries management. I would like to quickly take credit, though. All of the actions that the Council has done, that the North Pacific Council has done, the Council is made up of stakeholders. Most of those votes are unanimous votes. So the stakeholders are not sitting in the audience outside of the process. We are involved, we sometimes are at the table, and we are involved in the developing of these programs that the North Pacific, rightly so, is taking a great deal of pride about. So the stakeholders, again, are not opposed to ecosystem-based management, but we need to really go slow. We need to understand the trade-offs, and that's difficult because, again, the only people that you're going to really impact and manage is us. You're not going to take any more killer whales out of the system. Sea lions, even if they recover to where there's more than there ever used to be, hunting is not going to be ever allowed by non-natives. So I guess that's a little bit of the fear. We've done fishery ecosystem plans in Alaska. We've done Arctic FMP. We talk now about a fisheries ecosystem plan for the Bering Sea. I would say that I'm concerned about trying to get something in legislation that might prevent that. Again, we're concerned about the different definitions and when people think we've achieved that goal. And I'm a great expectations person. If you don't manage your expectations, you are never going to exceed them. So I can imagine there is going to be some entity or organization or person that doesn't think that we've achieved enough, no matter how much we do. There is no end to ecosystem-based fisheries management. It's a process. And as long as we continue to fund science that supports that process, I think we'll continue to move forward. Supporting ecosystem science is critical. But again, not at the expense of other science that needs to take place, i.e. stock surveys. I think that stakeholders are concerned about the extra value added that you get about understanding all this, or these complex food webs. What is the value added of that you are getting? And at what expense? In these times of budget constraints, and I think you've heard about some of the difficulties the Science Center has about not being able to fill positions. I think that's where we get concerned about if money is moved and shifted to areas that are exciting and cutting edge. But I'm glad to see that on all the slides, the first one is usually stock assessments and continuing that monitoring and evaluation of those, and I think that's critical. But we often ask ourselves in the North Pacific about even the Aleutian Islands FEP and the Bering Sea FEP. What does that add value? What more can we understand? What more does it bring to us besides an exercise? I have learned an awful lot about the ecosystem and the great work that the Science Center has done. And I think that I'm going to go back again, and you're going to hear me say this a few times. You've got to include the stakeholders. You've got to be able to be a 101 when it comes to talking to us about it. We need to understand it in the sense, in a way that I can go back to my membership and talk about it, so that you can alleviate the fear. There's a lot of fear. We have a lot of great trust with our Science Center and the people there, and they do a lot of great work. But there is a nervousness about getting too far down the path and us being left behind a little bit. So I think increased communication, an open and transparent process, making sure that you can add value and that you don't stop doing the things that are critical to managing fisheries, which is the stock assessment work. The other thing I think you need to recognize, or I hope that you recognize, is that the captains on our vessels are very aware and conscious of the ecosystem. They've been out there on the water for 35 years. If you have an opportunity to sit down and talk with them, they know about the euphausids. They can tell you about the cold pool. They can tell you about where the fish show up when it's cold and where they show up when it's warm, what the bird sign is. So we are, again, I think, felt as outsiders when this whole process comes to pass. But I think we're definitely involved. We're on the water. We understand the ecosystem considerations and understanding how it all fits together, because our captains need to know where to go. And so they have indicators. We talk about indicators. They have indicators. They know during certain times of the year where the fish are going to be, especially given the changing temperature, the different signs. So we support that kind of thinking and that process. But again, it's got to be, we have to trust. I think the ecosystem models and the food web models are exciting, but I think we need a little bit of time to understand that they're validated, that it works, that there's a time series. We are very lucky in the North Pacific to have a long time series of very basic data. I think that's why our region is different than a lot of the other regions, where there's the trust, there's the understanding. Associations like mine have spent lots of money trying to understand and do their own research, both gear research as well as adaptive research or applied research through the different universities. I know that we spend some time and money here at the University of Washington trying to help support that kind of science, help try to understand it. I have 2 people on staff that that's their job, is to pay attention to what the science is, what the literature is telling us, how we can get ahead, how we can see that vision, the 20-year vision. How can we help our members position themselves and their businesses in order to adapt and respond to the indicators that we are seeing today? That's my job. So saying all that, I go back to, I think we're doing it. And I guess I struggle why people think that we are not doing it, or what it is that we should be doing that we're not doing to get that check off from them. So if you have those ideas, I'll be out in the hallway later, and you can kind of tell me where I'm deficient in my thinking. But I guess I don't have a lot. I mean, the stakeholders are there. We're engaged. We're part of the process. We should take credit for the actions that the North Pacific done, because we sit at the table and we're there with you. But we are nervous. We are afraid. Change is difficult. But we support sustainable fisheries. We support science-based processes, and we support transparent processes. And if we can do all that, understand the trade-offs, communicate, explain, go slow, I think we'll all be better off. And I'm going to stop there and allow you to have your little break early. Thank you.